everybody, and welcome to the i14y podcast. Today's guest is Bill Mortimer. He is the VP of Marketing and Business Development at Xena Networks. He and his company are currently participating in the i14y Labs Plugfest, so I was able to sit down with him and get to know his story, as well as his company's approach to helping the future of disaggregated networks and network testing. So, without further ado, Bill Mortimer. First off, Bill, right?
Yes.
Where are you from? I heard Canada, correct?
I'm Canadian, but I've lived in Germany now for 20 years.
Okay. What brought you to Germany?
A transfer with work. So I was working with Hewlett-Packard at the time.
Oh, okay.
And currently working for Xena Networks in Copenhagen, Denmark.
Lovely. Okay, so what brought you to that company?
They were interested in some new technology from high-speed Ethernet and network emulation. A startup company that really had a good opportunity because they're building some leading edge products. And they asked me to join their board initially about 18 months ago. And then more recently, get involved in the company. So now I'm responsible for their marketing and business development.
Okay, so what started you in this industry? What got you involved with and motivated in this space?
Yeah, well, that happened about 30 years ago. So I joined a startup company at the time in Canada that got acquired by Hewlett-Packard, then stayed with Hewlett-Packard. And then as Agilent spun out of Hewlett-Packard, I stayed with Agilent. Then by that time, I was already living in Germany. They had transferred me over to Germany. They wanted me to move back to the US at the time, but as a family, we weren't ready to move.
Sure.
So I left them and joined JDSU at the time. They were building a business to build a wireless business in the lab and production area, and they asked me to lead it. And I did that for about 7 years. And then they asked me to move back to the US, but it was even a worse time to move for the family.
Sure.
So left and joined Spirent. So I worked with Spirent for 6 years from Germany, but it was a worldwide responsibility. And then I've left them just as COVID began, and then just recently joined Xena.
Now, what is Xena Networks? What is your goal? Like, what is your main product?
Yeah, they're in the test and measurement business, and they really have two main product lines. One is traffic generation for high-speed Ethernet. 800 gigabit Ethernet is the current challenges, but at lower rates as well. And the second product is to build a network emulator so it can actually introduce different impairments in the network to test how devices or applications would work under more realistic network conditions, which is the equipment that's being used in the Plugfest, in the interoperability lab today.
Okay, so I guess that's my next question is like, why? First off, why i14y? Why did you come to this lab as opposed to any other labs that may be testing?
Yeah, well, we're providing the test equipment. So we'll provide the test equipment to all the labs that make up the different test labs in this area, whether they're ORAN Alliance or TIP labs. Mm-hmm. So we'll participate with all of them. We have an agreement with Viavi. We're partners with Viavi where we provide the network emulation. So the ability to make those delay situations, there's 4 test cases that require that. So we'll collaborate with them. But the environment we have here will integrate directly into the EANTC automation platform. So they'll use it for this Plugfest, the subsequent ones, and then an ongoing service after.
Gotcha. Okay, so this Plugfest is kind of just the first of many, of a relationship that you have here at this lab.
Yeah, we've done other work with EANTC before, but with this lab, this is the beginning. And there's this project in Europe, and the one in Cable Labs in Colorado are the current 2 that are ongoing, running in parallel.
So what is the process of when you came here, this being like the first instance of you guys being in this lab in particular, what is the process from start to finish of getting integrated into how we work and how you'll kind of participate in that, if that makes sense?
Yep. First, it was the test case selection. So what are the tests that are going to be run in this particular Plugfest? So there was even an open question whether the test cases that we participate in are part of it. We now know they are. Mm-hmm. So then the equipment has been already shipped and integrated into the rack where the test equipment and the implementations are running. Mm-hmm. Then it needs to be integrated through software into the test management. That's the work that's going on right now. And then tests will be run by the test engineers. So those 4 particular tests will introduce different amounts of delay in the implementation to understand how the throughput varies. So that's what they'll do. The test engineers will do. They'll then produce the test results.
So what are you specifically doing here?
Well, being sure what tests are running.
Yeah.
What do we have to do to get organized to then do this integration into the test management system? And then see what else we do beyond this, because we also have some ideas of other services we could work together with the lab, and we'll see they're in the areas of 800 gigabit Ethernet and ANLT, a layer 1 technology.
Sure.
That aren't services offered today, but we could probably do collaboratively together.
Understood. Okay, so what is the importance of companies coming in and doing this testing, like specifically with your products and such?
Well, in general, this is going to test, especially in Open RAN, its whole premise is different implementations will be able to operate together. So it's really a necessary step that we demonstrate how that works. Understand there'll be 20 vendors running different sets of tests in this plug fest. That's a really good start, right? So the implementations, for ORAN to be successful, different implementations need to interoperate. Our particular part of it would be to try to introduce for those 4 test cases some network conditions where the delay that will be experienced in the real world will vary. So at what point will their throughput be degraded to a point that makes the service unacceptable, right? So they'll keep introducing delay until the throughput drops below 30% of the peak throughput. And then everybody needs to know what point that is, and is that acceptable for a deployment. So we try to introduce we do introduce a network delay, which gives more realistic network conditions, right?
I'm trying to understand at what point in a company's timeline, I guess, is it important to make this jump into these testing, or is it like something that you should always be considering?
Yeah, particularly the way the time to market for companies becomes more and more important. They've got to figure out what their testing strategy is right from the design point, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But the testing requirements will change, right? But as you're starting to do development, how are you going to build up a test environment that just lets you even simulate the other parts of the network, for example, right? Or test your implementation if the functionality and throughput is what you expect it to be. So it even starts then as you're just doing your implementation. Then as you start to move into field trials or interoperability trials, then you need some equipment to just simulate different conditions or network conditions or different behavior from the different user equipment would be the need. And then when it moves into the network, if there's problems in the network, there needs to be some equipment to be able to monitor and watch for abnormal behavior, or just understand the performance and the functionality when it's operating. And then particularly if there's some serious degradation or something doesn't work, how do they quickly find it, isolate it, perhaps put in a patch, and then how do you verify it's working? So the requirements for the test change, but it starts early and continues, right?
Gotcha.
You may have heard the term continuous improvement, right? Where that cycle between you do some development and then test it right away, and the quicker you do that and bring in real world conditions into the development cycle as quickly as possible, it is a methodology that allows people to get their equipment to the market and work in the market when it gets there, right?
Sure. I guess more of a personal question. What more got you into this industry? Like personally, why? Where did you go to college? What did you do with that? And why did you stay so long in this field?
It started at university. I had a part-time support from a particular company called Idacom Electronics while I was studying at University of British Columbia. They offered me a job out of university. I didn't know necessarily I would enjoy what they exactly do, sure, but the opportunity to travel, to work with customers around the world just became unique, right? If you work for one company that just builds an implementation, you're working in their office or their set or the offices that they may have around the world. But the opportunity in the test and measurement area to work with wide set of customers in different parts of the world. So very quickly I'd moved to Germany with that company, and it's given me the opportunity to travel around the world and work in different parts of the world. That is keeping me in it and keeping me interested.
Yeah, no, of course.
I think as you look back on the last decades, there seems to be waves of technology that make a big difference in how fast or how good communication occurs, right? Even the movement from fixed networks to wireless networks, or the speed of the networks, right? The fact that we're working at 800 gigabits per second Ethernet is kind of the next challenge, and there's even work going on for 1.6 terabit Ethernet. So it's same thing, just very, very fast, right? And the fact that that can work and engineers are pushing the boundaries of what's possible with very ingenious techniques. But the challenges remain the same. And the satisfaction for me comes from when the engineers using our equipment actually get their job done and are complimentary about the results they got from what we contributed, right? That's the satisfaction. And that looks the same now as it did 30 years ago. And that's where the personal satisfaction certainly comes.
Very, very cool. What is there a specific project that came through your testing area that that you saw in the time that was really cool and like was kind of pushing the boundaries, or like, is there anything that's like happening currently that you can speak on that you see like a future with it? You like, do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, but probably not a succinct answer of one particular point in time.
Sure.
Because it seems contiguous. You always think you're working on the leading edge and you wonder if there's going to be another one.
Yeah.
Of course there is, but you don't know what it is because you're working with the engineers and the companies on what at the time is leading edge, right? But that was called fast Ethernet back in the original days. There was no way we'd assume we'd be working at 1.6 terabits per second Ethernet, right? So it's, and then the mobile networks, how they're evolving, right? How quick we're even going from 3G to LTE to 4G to 5G, 6G is even being discussed, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
So the waves of innovation are basically endless, right?
Continuous. Yeah, of course. So from what you've seen so far, I will do a little shameless plugging, but from what you've seen so far here at the lab, would you recommend it to people that are looking to test their systems?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Mostly because you're attracting a lot of vendors, like with different implementations. You got a really good mix of the test and measurement participants, right? With Viavi, Keysight, Xena Networks, and others participating in the implementation. Just the culture of the lab itself feels very innovative and very upbeat, right? And it's a project that's not just for a short period of time. As I understand this project, it's going to run for at least a 2-year period. And then following that, EANTC will carry on an operating business, right? So that learning gets carried on in the industry seems to be a brilliant approach, right? And probably easy to attract people coming to Berlin, right? It's a good place for them to come.
Yeah.
But the quality of the people and the quality of the lab seems first rate, right?
Love that. And then a shameless plug from your end, if you'd like it. Is there anything that your company is working on right now that you'd like to kind of put out there and for people to see?
Yeah, the use of this network emulator really is important to enable this 5G O-RAN networks, right? Because the conditions under which those networks will really run will have varying amounts of delay. Mm-hmm. And secondly, what we're doing as a traffic generator for high-speed Ethernet is pushing the envelope there. Mm-hmm. So right now it's silicon developers, equipment manufacturers that are working on that, but it'll eventually be rolled into the networks as well. But working at that 800 gigabit per second Ethernet speeds is spectacular, frankly, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you very much.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, of course.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.